I've always been a man of simple principles. At 67, I don't have many luxuries, but I have what matters most, my honor. I built a respectable career as an operations manager at Apex Solutions, a mid-sized technology firm. I'm not the owner, not a high-level executive, but my work has always supported my family with dignity. My daughter, Melissa, is 26, smart, with a business degree, and determined like her mother, my late wife, who left us when Melissa was only 15. Since then, it's been just the two of us against the world. I taught her important values: hard work, honesty, integrity, or at least I thought I had. My home office is the only place truly mine, a sanctuary. A small room at the end of the hallway in our apartment with my solid wood desk I bought 30 years ago, my accounting and management books, my organized pens, everything in its proper place. I've always had one simple rule: no one uses my office without my permission. It's not an unreasonable rule, just respect for my space. Melissa always understood this, until she started working at Apex 6 months ago. Hired as a junior executive assistant in the marketing department, she was thrilled to secure a position at the same company as me. I admit I was initially concerned, but she assured me she would be professional and work hard to build her own reputation without relying on my name. Dad, I know you've been there for 30 years, but I want to show my own value, make my own path. Nobody will be able to say, I got something because I'm your daughter. Her words filled me with pride at that moment, and for a few weeks, everything went well. Melissa would come home exhausted but satisfied, telling me about the projects she was working on, the new skills she was learning. I listened attentively, gave advice when asked, but mainly I watched with satisfaction as she forged her own path. Until Richard Blackwell entered the picture. Richard, 45, marketing director, my direct superior in the company hierarchy. A brilliant businessman, charismatic and with a colorful reputation when it came to relationships with young female employees. Nothing that amounted to harassment or resulted in formal complaints, but rumors ran through the corridors. Richard was divorced, wealthy, and seemed to enjoy flaunting it. One Friday, I came home early. It had been a stressful day, with problems on one of the production lines that took up my entire morning. I decided to leave early to rest and prepare dinner for Melissa. When I opened the apartment door, I heard laughter coming from the hallway. Female laughter, clearly Melissa, and a male voice that sounded familiar. My heart raced when I realized they were coming from my office, my room, my sanctuary. I walked silently to the partially open door and stopped. Melissa was sitting in my chair with her feet on my desk, showing something on her laptop to a man who was leaning over her, Richard Blackwell. So that's how we make the projections for the quarter, see? It's much simpler than it seems. Richard's voice sounded calm, almost intimate. Wow, you make it seem so easy. My old man always complicates everything with those outdated spreadsheets. Melissa laughed, a laugh I'd never heard from her before, a laugh that cut me deep. Your father is old school, efficient but outdated. The future is more dynamic like you. Richard placed his hand on Melissa's shoulder, a touch that lasted too long to be merely professional. I stood paralyzed for a few seconds. My own daughter calling me old man, in my office, with my boss, invading my space, disrespecting my rules, mocking me. I cleared my throat loudly, intentionally. They both jumped, startled. Dad, you're home early! Melissa stood up quickly, her face shifting between surprise and guilt. Mr. Mitchell, good afternoon. Richard straightened up, adjusting his tie, his face assuming that professional expression he used in meetings. We were just reviewing some strategies for next week's presentation in my office. It wasn't a question, it was a statement. My voice came out calmer than I expected, considering the hurricane forming inside me. Sorry, Dad. It's just that the Wi-Fi works better in this room, and we needed to finish this today. Melissa began to justify, but I raised my hand, interrupting her. Richard, shouldn't you be at the office? It's only 3 p.m. on a Friday. I kept my tone professional, but my eyes didn't hide my disapproval. Richard smiled, that confident smile of someone who rarely faces consequences. I decided to take a break to personally guide Melissa on the Hanson project. She's shown exceptional potential, and I thought a mentoring session would be beneficial in my house, in my office, without consulting me. Each word came out like a stone. An uncomfortable silence filled the room. Melissa suddenly seemed smaller, like when she was a teenager, and I caught her coming home after curfew. It was my idea, Mr. Mitchell. I apologize for the intrusion. It won't happen again. Richard picked up his briefcase, gave Melissa a look I couldn't decipher, and headed for the door. We'll finish this on Monday at the office. Have a good weekend. After he left, Melissa tried to explain, saying it was just work, that Richard was genuinely interested in her career, that I was overreacting. I listened in silence, feeling a weight in my chest that wasn't just disappointment, but growing concern. Melissa, you know the rules of this house. My office is private. It's not a space to bring colleagues, especially without telling me. Dad, don't be so old-fashioned. It was just a work meeting. Richard is my boss. He's helping me grow in the company. Richard is my boss too, Melissa, and he has a reputation you probably don't know about. Her eyes narrowed. What kind of reputation? I hesitated. As a father, I wanted to protect her. As an older man in the company, I knew the stories. Richard wasn't a predator, but he was definitely a man who mixed pleasure and business in questionable ways. He's had relationships with employees before. Relationships that usually end with either promotions or terminations, depending on how the breakup goes. Melissa laughed, a sound that surprised me with its coldness. Oh, please, are you jealous because he sees potential in me? Or are you afraid I'll surpass you in that company where you've been stagnant for decades? Her words hit me like a slap. Never in my entire life had I imagined my daughter would speak to me like this. The girl who held my hand in parks, who cried on my shoulder when her mother passed away, who asked me for advice on everything. This isn't about me, Melissa. It's about respect. For my space and for the professional dynamics you don't seem to fully understand. She grabbed her phone and laptop. Well, maybe it's time for me to find my own apartment then. If I can't even work in peace here. Maybe it is, I replied, more out of wounded pride than from actually wanting her to leave. She left the office, and I stood there, looking at my desk, my chair, feeling that something important had changed between us. It wasn't just the disrespect for my space. It was how she had spoken, how she had looked at me, as if I were an obstacle, and no longer her safe harbor. That night, Melissa didn't have dinner at home. She sent a message saying she was with colleagues from work. I sat alone at the table, going over our discussion in my mind, wondering if I had overreacted. But something deeply bothered me, the familiarity between her and Richard, the comment about me being old and outdated, the way he touched her. Over the weekend, Melissa barely stayed at home. When we crossed paths, the atmosphere was tense, with superficial conversations and forced smiles. On Monday, we returned to work as if nothing had happened, each heading to our department. I tried to see her at lunch, but she sent a message saying she had an important team meeting. It was during that week that I began to notice the changes. Melissa coming home late every night, buying new clothes, more expensive than her salary would allow. A French perfume I recognized as Richard's ex-wife's favorite. She was different, more confident perhaps, but also more distant, as if keeping secrets. One Tuesday, 2 weeks after the incident, I went back to pick up documents I'd forgotten. As I passed the marketing department, I saw Richard's office with the blinds closed, unusual, since he liked to maintain an open-door policy. His secretary wasn't at her desk, which was also strange at that hour. Something made me stop, a feeling. I approached the door silently and for a moment considered knocking. But then I heard it. Melissa's voice, low, intimate. Nobody needs to know for now, especially my father. Richard's response came in a tone I'd never heard him use in the professional environment. Don't worry about him. Soon things will change around here. Trust me. I backed away quickly, feeling sick. I didn't need to hear more to understand what was happening. My daughter and my boss were in a relationship they were deliberately keeping secret from me. I returned home with my head spinning, trying to decide what to do. Confront her? Talk to Richard? Go to HR? Each option seemed inadequate, insufficient. As a father, I wanted to protect her. As an employee, I felt there was an obvious conflict of interest that should be reported. It was that night that I made a decision I'm not proud of, but one that would change everything. If they wanted to play this game of secrets, I needed to know exactly what I was fighting against. I needed proof, information, certainties. The next morning, I stopped at an electronics store on my way to work. I bought a small recording device, the kind private detectives use. Discreet, efficient, with a long-lasting battery. I had never done anything like this before, and my hands trembled as I purchased it. The clerk looked at me curiously, probably wondering what kind of middle-aged man buys surveillance equipment on a Wednesday morning. It's for a home security project, I lied, feeling both ridiculous and desperate at the same time. I returned home during lunch, when I knew Melissa would be at work. I went to my office and after some hesitation, installed the device under my desk in a discreet location where it would hardly be noticed. I tested it to make sure it worked, that it captured voices clearly. This is madness, I said to myself while adjusting the equipment. I'm spying on my own daughter. But then I remembered Richard's tone, the absent secretary, the closed blinds, the nobody needs to know. No, I wasn't just spying on my daughter, I was protecting her. Or at least, that's what I tried to convince myself as I finished the installation and hurried out, feeling like an intruder in my own home. That same night, Melissa arrived late again, but this time she wasn't alone. I heard the front door open while I pretended to sleep and recognized Richard's voice in the entryway. Are you sure he's asleep? Richard's voice, low and cautious. Yes, he sleeps early, always with those outdated earplugs. Not even an earthquake would wake him. Melissa's voice sounded different, more mature, more calculated. We need to be quick then. I want to see those documents today. Documents? What documents? I remained motionless in bed, controlled breathing, racing heart. I heard footsteps down the hallway, my office door opening, closing. They were in there, again, without my permission. I lay there, frozen, listening to the muffled sounds coming from my office. The rational part of me wanted to get up, confront them, demand an explanation. But something held me back. A need to understand the full extent of what was happening before acting. 20 minutes later, I heard them leave my office, their voices now in hushed whispers. I couldn't make out their words, only the soft click of the front door as they left my apartment at 11:30 p.m. I waited another 10 minutes before getting up, making sure they wouldn't return unexpectedly. My legs felt heavy as I walked to my office, turned on the light and scanned the room. Everything looked normal at first glance, but I knew better. I'd been a manager long enough to spot when things had been disturbed. My filing cabinet drawer was slightly ajar, the one where I kept copies of quarterly reports and internal memos. Not confidential information, but certainly not something Richard should be interested in. Unless I checked my computer. It was turned off, just as I'd left it. But the position of the keyboard was different, angled away from its usual place. Someone had used it recently. The recording device. I'd almost forgotten in my haste to investigate. With trembling hands, I retrieved it from under the desk and plugged in headphones. What I heard over the next 15 minutes changed everything. Richard's voice came through first, clear and businesslike. "These are older than I expected. Do you have access to the latest operations reports?" "Not yet," Melissa replied, "but I can get them. Dad keeps everything on his work computer, and he never changes his password. It's still Mum's birthday." A pause, then Richard again. "Good. We need to understand the full operational structure before making our move. Peterson Dynamics won't acquire a company without knowing every weakness." Peterson Dynamics, our biggest competitor, the company that had been trying to buy out Apex for years. "How soon do you need it?" Melissa's voice, eager to please. "As soon as possible. The board meeting is in 2 weeks, and I need time to prepare my presentation. Once we show them how inefficient the operations department is under the current leadership, they'll have no choice but to restructure. And you'll be the obvious choice to lead the new combined entity." Melissa sounded impressed, admiring. "We will be in an excellent position, Melissa. You've proven your loyalty. When I take over, you'll be right beside me. Your father and his outdated methods will be respectfully retired." A soft laugh from my daughter. "He won't know what hit him. 30 years of loyalty to a company that's about to push him out." "Business isn't about loyalty, it's about results. Mitchell's methods were effective once, but times have changed. Peterson wants innovation, agility." "Speaking of innovation," Melissa's voice lowered, became suggestive. "We still have time before we need to head back to your place." The recording continued, but I removed the headphones, feeling physically ill. I didn't need to hear more. The truth was clear, horrifying, and heartbreaking. My daughter and my boss weren't just having an affair. They were conspiring with our company's biggest competitor to orchestrate a hostile takeover, one that would result in my termination and their promotion, using my home, my office, and my trust to betray not just me, but the entire company. I sat there in the dark for hours, the weight of the betrayal crushing my chest. The daughter I had raised alone, protected, supported through college, welcomed into my workplace, now plotting my professional destruction. For what? A promise of advancement from a man who would discard her the moment she was no longer useful, just as he had done with others before her. By dawn, my shock had crystallized into resolve. I wouldn't confront them, not yet. I needed more evidence, something irrefutable that HR and the board couldn't ignore. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about the company, about hundreds of employees whose livelihoods were at stake. I copied the recording to a secure flash drive and hid it in my bedroom. Then I returned the device to its place under the desk. For the next week, I maintained a facade of normalcy, going to work, exchanging pleasantries with Melissa when our paths crossed at home, even nodding respectfully to Richard in the hallways. Meanwhile, I observed. Noticed how Richard would call Melissa into his office with increasing frequency, how they both attended meetings with external partners that weren't on the official calendar, how Richard had suddenly taken an interest in operations, my department, requesting reports and data that had never concerned him before. The recording device captured 3 more late-night visits to my office, each one more damning than the last. In one, Richard detailed exactly which operational processes he planned to outsource after the takeover, processes that would result in at least 60 layoffs. In another, he guided Melissa through accessing my secure work folders using my personal information. "Your father's generation never understood digital security," he laughed, "using the same password for everything. So predictable." The final recording was the most painful. Melissa speaking candidly about me. "He's always been so rigid, so stuck in his ways. Mom was the only one who could handle him. After she died, living with him was like living in a museum. Don't touch this, don't move that, everything has its place. Well, soon he'll have plenty of time to organize his precious belongings in retirement, Richard replied, though I doubt he'll be able to maintain this apartment on a pension. They laughed together, a sound that felt like needles in my heart. This wasn't just business anymore, this was cruelty. Deliberate, calculated disregard for 30 years of hard work, for the sacrifices I'd made as a single father, for the values I thought I'd instilled. 2 days before the board meeting Richard had mentioned, I made my move. I arrived at work early, before 7 a.m., when only security and maintenance staff were around. I went straight to HR and requested an urgent meeting with both the HR director and the company CEO for that morning. It's regarding a security breach and potential corporate espionage, I explained to the bewildered HR assistant. I have evidence that can't wait. By 9 a.m., I was seated in the conference room with Elizabeth Chen, HR Director, and Thomas Grayson, CEO. Both looked concerned and slightly irritated at the unexpected meeting. "This better be important, Mitchell," Grayson said, checking his watch. "The quarterly review starts in an hour." "It is, sir." I placed my laptop on the table and inserted the flash drive. "What you're about to hear involves Richard Blackwell, Marketing Director, my daughter Melissa Mitchell, and a planned corporate takeover by Peterson Dynamics." Their expressions changed from annoyance to shock as I played selected portions of the recordings. By the time I finished, Elizabeth was taking rapid notes, and Grayson's face had hardened into a mask of controlled anger. "How did you obtain these recordings?" Elizabeth asked, her tone professional but eyes wide. "From a device I installed in my home office after noticing suspicious behavior. Richard and Melissa had been using my personal space to access company information without my knowledge." I took a deep breath. "I'm aware this puts my daughter in a difficult position, but this goes beyond family matters. This is about protecting the company." Grayson nodded slowly. "We'll need the legal team here immediately, and security. I want Blackwell's access revoked within the hour." "And your daughter?" Elizabeth asked gently. The question hung in the air. My heart twisted painfully. "She should be treated according to company policy for her actions. No special consideration." What happened next unfolded with surprising speed. Security escorted Richard from his office within the hour, his face a mixture of shock and fury when he saw me watching from across the hallway. Melissa was called to HR shortly after. I deliberately stayed away, unable to bear witnessing her moment of reckoning. By afternoon, the company was buzzing with rumors, though the official statement merely mentioned an internal investigation into potential policy violations. I sat in my office, door closed, alternating between numbness and grief. I had done the right thing for the company, but at what personal cost? Around 4 p.m. my phone rang. It was Grayson's assistant, requesting my immediate presence in the CEO's office. With a heavy heart, I made my way there, expecting perhaps a formal thank you, or possibly questions about my own future, given the family connection to the scandal. Instead, I found Melissa sitting across from Grayson, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. She wouldn't look at me as I entered. "Mitchell, please sit down." Grayson indicated the chair beside my daughter, an uncomfortable proximity neither of us wanted. "Your daughter has something she'd like to say to you." Melissa finally looked up, her expression a complex mixture of shame, defiance, and something else. Fear, perhaps. "Dad," she began, her voice cracking slightly, I need to explain." "We've heard the recordings, Miss Mitchell," Grayson interjected firmly. "What's needed now isn't explanation, but accountability." "Sir," I said, surprising myself by speaking up, "I would like to hear what she has to say." Grayson raised an eyebrow but nodded, sitting back in his chair. Melissa took a deep breath. "Richard approached me 3 months ago, said he'd noticed my potential, wanted to mentor me. At first, It was just that. Career advice, introductions to important clients. She twisted her hands in her lap. And then he started complimenting me, taking me to business dinners. It felt special being noticed by someone so important. I remained silent, watching her struggle through her narrative. When he first mentioned Peterson Dynamics, he framed it as an opportunity, a merger that would benefit everyone. He said the operations department was holding Apex back, that it needed new leadership. She glanced at me quickly, then away. He convinced me that you would receive a generous retirement package, that you'd be taken care of. And you believed him. I couldn't keep the hurt from my voice. I wanted to. Her shoulders slumped. He made it sound like I was helping the company evolve, helping you avoid the stress of eventual layoffs. By the time I realized it was a hostile takeover plan, I was involved with him. He had information on me, promises I'd made in emails, company documents I'd shared. Oh, blackmail, Grayson stated flatly. Not explicitly, but there was always the implication that we were in this together now, that if it failed, we both would fall. She wiped a tear. I knew it was wrong using your office, your computer, but he insisted we couldn't risk being discovered at work. Each time, I told myself it was the last time, that I'd find a way out. The room fell silent. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, and saw beneath the new clothes and confident exterior the same vulnerable girl who had lost her mother too young, who had perhaps been seeking validation, direction from the wrong source. Mr. Mitchell, Grayson broke the silence, your actions this morning have likely saved this company from a disastrous takeover. The board has been informed, and Peterson's CEO has already called to disavow any knowledge of Blackwell's actions, claiming he was acting independently. He leaned forward. We owe you a debt of gratitude. I nodded, unable to find appropriate words. As for Ms. Mitchell, he continued, his tone cooling slightly, under normal circumstances, the actions described would result in immediate termination. However, given the evidence of manipulation by a superior and her full cooperation with our investigation this afternoon, we've decided on a different approach. Melissa looked up, surprise evident on her face. 2-week suspension without pay, followed by a transfer to our Seattle office, should you choose to remain with the company. A fresh start, away from this situation. Grayson stood, indicating the meeting was concluding. I suggest you both take some time to discuss this privately. These matters extend beyond company walls. As we walked silently to the parking garage, the weight of the day pressing down on us, Melissa finally spoke. I didn't mean those things I said about you, about your methods being outdated. I was just saying what he wanted to hear. But you thought them, I replied, the hurt still fresh. You must have at some level. She stopped walking. Dad, I was wrong. So wrong. About everything. I let ambition and flattery cloud my judgment. I betrayed not just the company, but the one person who has always been there for me. Her voice broke. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just need you to know I see it now. What he was doing, who he really was, who you really are. I looked at my daughter, this complicated young woman who had made a terrible mistake, but who was still my child. The anger was still there, the disappointment raw, but beneath it all was something else. A father's enduring love. Seattle is a nice city, I said finally. Good coffee. A ghost of a smile crossed her face. Are you saying I should take the transfer? I'm saying everyone deserves a second chance, a fresh start. I unlocked my car. The question is, what will you do with yours? She didn't answer immediately, just looked at me with eyes so like her mother's, determined, intelligent, capable of both great error and great growth. I'll earn back your trust, she said finally, however long it takes. I nodded, not quite ready to offer false reassurances. Trust, once broken, doesn't mend easily, but it can mend. With time, with effort, with genuine remorse. I had seen enough of that today to believe it possible. As we drove home in separate cars, I reflected on how quickly life can change, how relationships can fracture and begin to heal in the space of a single day, how listening, really listening, sometimes reveals truths that mere surveillance cannot. I had installed a bug in my office to catch them in their betrayal, but what I'd really done was open a channel to a truth I wasn't prepared for. That my daughter, like all of us, was capable of terrible mistakes, and that I, despite everything, was still capable of forgiveness. Not today, perhaps, but someday. One truth at a time. The next few weeks were a strange dance of distance and cautious reconnection. Melissa served her suspension at home, both of us occupying the same space, yet separated by an invisible wall of hurt and regret. We spoke about practical matters, meals, household chores, her upcoming transfer to Seattle, but avoided the deeper conversations that hovered in the air between us. I threw myself into work, accepting additional responsibilities in the aftermath of the scandal. Richard's departure had left a vacuum that needed filling, and the CEO had asked me to temporarily oversee certain marketing operations that intersected with my department. It was challenging but welcome. The distraction kept my mind from constantly replaying the recordings, from hearing my daughter's voice conspiring against me. One evening, about 10 days into her suspension, I came home to find Melissa in the kitchen, preparing dinner, not just reheating something or making a sandwich, actually cooking, with ingredients spread across the counter and a recipe pulled up on her tablet. "Chicken parmesan," she said when I paused in the doorway. "Mom's recipe. I found her old cookbook in the storage closet." The mention of her mother, my wife, sent a complicated wave of emotion through me. Melissa rarely spoke of her anymore, as if the pain of loss had been compartmentalized somewhere deep inside her. "She always added extra basil," I said, setting my briefcase down. "Said it brightened the whole dish." A small smile touched Melissa's lips. I remember. I added extra. We ate together that night, our first real shared meal since everything had happened. The conversation was still careful, measured, but something had shifted. A tiny crack in the wall. "I've been thinking about Seattle," she said as we cleared the dishes. "About what kind of apartment to look for." "The company should help with relocation," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "They have resources for transfers." "I know." She hesitated, then plunged ahead. "But I was hoping you might help me look. Online, I mean. You've always been good at spotting the details in contracts and listings that I miss." It was an olive branch, small but significant. An acknowledgement of my value, of my judgment. The very things she had disparaged in those late-night conversations with Richard. "I can do that," I said simply. Over the following days, we established a new routine. In the evenings, we would sit in the living room, notably not my office, and review apartment listings in Seattle, discussing neighborhoods, commute times, amenities. It was superficial in many ways, yet deeply meaningful. We were planning her future, one in which she would make her own way, but with my guidance rather than my exclusion. One night, as we finished reviewing a particularly promising listing, she closed her laptop and turned to face me directly. "Dad, I need to ask you something important." I set down my reading glasses, giving her my full attention. "Do you think I should stay with Apex, after everything that's happened?" Her voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed her uncertainty. "Part of me feels I should resign completely, start fresh somewhere else. But another part feels like running away." I finished for her. She nodded, looking relieved that I understood. I considered my answer carefully. This wasn't just about career advice. It was about values, about facing consequences, about redemption. "Staying is harder," I said finally. It means facing people who know what happened, proving yourself every day, rebuilding trust inch by inch. Leaving might seem cleaner, but some messes need to be faced, not escaped. That's what I thought you'd say. She smiled faintly. The Mitchell way. Face your problems head on. It served me well for 67 years. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment before she spoke again, her voice softer. He never cared about me, you know, Richard. It was all about what I could do for him, what doors I could open. She twisted a strand of hair, a nervous habit from childhood. I see that now. I was just dazzled by the attention, the praise, the promises. We all want to be valued, I said, choosing my words with care. To be seen. It makes us vulnerable to those who know how to weaponize that need. I should have known better. Her voice caught slightly. After watching you all these years, how you treat people, how you lead. Integrity isn't just a word to you, it's how you live. The compliment warmed something in me that had been cold for weeks, but I needed to be honest with her. I haven't always gotten it right, Melissa. I made plenty of mistakes when I was younger, but you learned from them. That's the difference. She looked down at her hands. I want to learn from this. Really learn, not just move past it. Then I think you have your answer about Seattle, I said gently. It's not running away if you're running towards something better. 2 days before her scheduled departure, I came home to find Melissa in my office, the scene of the betrayal. My first instinct was alarm, a flashback to finding her there with Richard, but she was alone and she wasn't at my desk. She was standing by the bookshelf, looking at family photos I kept there, her graduation, our last vacation with her mother, the 3 of us at the beach. I've been thinking about Mom a lot lately, she said without turning around, wondering what she would say about all this. I joined her at the shelf, looking at my wife's smiling face frozen in time. She'd be disappointed at first, I said honestly, but then she'd roll up her sleeves and help you fix it. That was her way. Less judgment, more action. I miss her guidance, Melissa admitted, especially now. She's still guiding you in a way. I tapped my chest. In here, the values she helped instill, they don't disappear. Sometimes they just get temporarily overlooked. Melissa turned to face me, her expression open and vulnerable in a way I hadn't seen since she was a teenager. I crossed a line, Dad. Using your office, your personal space. After everything that's happened, you'd have every right to never trust me in here again. Trust isn't an all-or-nothing proposition, I replied, surprising myself with the realization as I spoke it. It's built back one small proof at a time. She nodded, understanding the unspoken message. We had started rebuilding, but we weren't there yet. It would take time. The day of her departure arrived with a mixture of sadness and hope. I had taken the day off to drive her to the airport, her 2 large suitcases and carry-on packed with the essentials for her new beginning. The rest would be shipped later once she found a permanent place. As we approached the security checkpoint, that familiar father's anxiety washed over me, the same feeling I'd had when dropping her off at college, when watching her drive away with her first boyfriend, when sending her into the world at every new stage of independence. You'll call when you land? I asked, knowing she would, yet needing the reassurance. Of course, she smiled, and I'll send pictures of the temporary housing, show you I made it safely. We stood awkwardly for a moment, both aware that this goodbye was different from others. It wasn't just a daughter leaving for a new opportunity. It was a fracture beginning to heal, a relationship finding its new shape. Dad, she said suddenly, her voice firm despite the emotion in her eyes. I want you to know something. Whatever happens in Seattle, however my career unfolds, I won't ever take shortcuts like that again. I won't betray someone's trust for advancement, especially not yours. I believed her. Despite everything, I believed her. I know you won't, I said simply. She hugged me then, tight and fierce like she used to as a child. I held my daughter close. This complicated, flawed, precious person who had made a terrible mistake but was now finding her way back to her true self. "I love you, Dad," she whispered. "I love you too," I replied, meaning it completely, despite the hurt that was still healing, as I watched her walk through security, turning once to wave before disappearing into the crowd. I felt a curious lightness, not because she was gone, but because in her leaving was the promise of return, changed, wiser, stronger. The apartment felt emptier than usual that evening. I moved through the rooms aimlessly, adjusting to the new silence. Eventually, I found myself at the door of my office, the room that had been the center of so much turmoil. I stepped inside, looking at it with fresh eyes. The desk where Richard had leaned over my daughter, the chair where she had sat with her feet up, the hidden spot where I had placed the recording device, now removed and discarded. This space held so many memories, both bitter and sweet. For a moment, I considered rearranging everything, purging the room of its recent history, but that felt like avoidance rather than healing. Instead, I sat at my desk and opened the bottom drawer, pulling out a small wooden box I hadn't looked at in years. Inside were mementos of my life with my wife, concert tickets, dried flowers from our anniversary dinners, silly notes we'd written each other, small treasures from a love cut too short. I added a new item to the collection, a photo of Melissa in her graduation cap and gown, her whole future ahead of her, her smile radiating pride and possibility. That was the daughter I knew, the one who had lost her way but was finding it again, the one who had the courage to face her mistakes and begin anew. My phone pinged with a message. Melissa sending a selfie from the airport gate, making a funny face like she used to when she was younger. "Boarding soon," the text read. "Seattle, ready or not?" I smiled, typing back, "They don't know what's coming." As I closed the wooden box and returned it to its drawer, I realized something important. The betrayal had happened in this office, yes, but so could the healing. This room wasn't tainted. It was simply part of our story now. The bad and the good, the mistakes and the growth. Just like the bug I had planted, which had revealed painful truths, but ultimately led to necessary change. Sometimes the hardest moments create the opportunity for the most meaningful transformation. 3 months passed quickly. Melissa settled into her role in Seattle, calling regularly with updates on her new apartment, her colleagues, the projects she was working on. She seemed more grounded, more thoughtful about her career choices. The ambitious spark was still there, but tempered now with wisdom that usually comes only from painful experience. At work, things had stabilized. Richard's position had been filled by Janet Kwan, a longtime employee with an impeccable reputation for integrity. The Peterson Dynamics takeover attempt had faded into company law, a cautionary tale referenced in ethics seminars. One Friday afternoon, I received an unexpected call from Thomas Grayson's office requesting a meeting at 4 p.m. When I arrived, Janet was there, along with Harold Fisher, the CFO. "Mitchell, have a seat," Grayson gestured. "We've been reviewing the company's structure in light of our growth projections for the next 5 years." He leaned forward. "Your handling of the situation with Blackwell demonstrated something we've perhaps taken for granted. Your loyalty, your ethical compass, your willingness to make difficult decisions for the greater good, these qualities are increasingly rare." "I only did what was necessary," I replied, uncomfortable with the praise. "Which is exactly our point," Harold interjected. "You did what was necessary despite personal cost. That kind of integrity is exactly what we need in senior leadership." Grayson nodded. "We're creating a new position, Executive Vice President of Operational Integrity, overseeing operations, compliance, ethics, and strategic planning. We'd like you to consider taking it on." I sat in stunned silence. A promotion? At my age? "Say you'll think about it," Janet suggested. More responsibility, yes, but also more influence over the company's direction, the chance to institutionalize the values you've demonstrated throughout your career. That evening I called Melissa to share the news. Her enthusiasm seemed genuine as she asked thoughtful questions about the responsibilities and strategic implications. "You're going to take it, right?" she asked when I'd finished explaining. "I'm not sure. At my age, taking on more responsibility instead of winding down." "Since when has James Mitchell ever wound down?" She laughed. "This is perfect for you, using your experience to protect what you've helped build all these years." Her perception surprised me. "That's exactly how I've been thinking about it." "Of course it is. I know you." Her voice softened. "Better than I've sometimes shown." After a moment, she continued hesitantly. "I have news too. I've been recommended for a team lead position here, a small group but with real responsibility." "Melissa, that's wonderful." "I meant it." "So soon?" "It's not official yet, but my manager said I've demonstrated exceptional analytical skills and ethical judgment." "Can you believe it, ethical judgment?" She laughed softly. I think Mom would be proud." "She would be," I said, feeling the truth of it deep in my bones. "I am too." 2 weeks later, I accepted the promotion. The same day, Melissa was officially named team lead in Seattle. We celebrated with a video call, toasting each other with champagne, despite being thousands of miles apart. "To new beginnings," she said, raising her glass. "And to lessons learned," I added. 6 months into our new roles, Melissa asked if she could visit for a weekend. When she arrived, I noticed immediate changes, not just in her appearance, but in her demeanor. She carried herself with a quiet confidence, different from the brittle ambition she'd displayed during her time with Richard. On her second evening home, she asked if we could talk in my office. I hesitated briefly, memories of betrayal still fresh, but nodded. This room had been the scene of our greatest rift. Perhaps it should also witness our healing. "I've been thinking about what happened," she said once we were seated, "about why I was so vulnerable to Richard's manipulation." I listened silently as she continued. "After Mum died, I felt rudderless. You were grieving too, and you dealt with it by creating more structure, more rules. I rebelled against that in small ways, then bigger ones." She looked around the office. "When Richard came along offering shortcuts to success, praise, attention, I wanted to believe I deserved it all." "We all want validation," I said gently, "but not at any cost." She met my eyes directly. "I'm building my team differently in Seattle, mentoring properly, creating a culture where people feel valued for their real contributions, not their willingness to cut corners." Pride swelled in my chest, not for what I had taught her, but for what she had learned on her own through painful experience. "I installed that bug thinking I needed to catch you in betrayal," I admitted. "But what I really discovered was something about myself, that despite everything, I never stopped believing in your fundamental goodness, your capacity to learn and grow." She smiled, eyes bright with unshed tears. "Sometimes we need to hear the hard truths about ourselves, even when they're recorded on a hidden device." We laughed together, the sound filling my office with something new. Forgiveness, understanding, and the promise of a stronger relationship forged through fire. That night, as we shared dinner at home, I realized something profound. The bug I planted hadn't just exposed a conspiracy, it had forced us both to confront uncomfortable truths. For Melissa, about the shortcuts she'd been willing to take. For me, about my reluctance to see my daughter as the complex, fallible adult she had become. Sometimes, I thought as we clinked glasses over dessert, the greatest revelations come not from what we discover about others, but what we learn about ourselves in the process. And sometimes, what changes everything isn't the betrayal itself, but how we choose to rebuild in its aftermath.